What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. This is our now back to weekly show where we review the magic stories that are actually being posted on Wizards' website.
Woo!
And that's about as excited as you're going to see us today. But before we get into that, today we are reviewing specifically War of the Spark Ravnica, Old Friends and New by Greg Weisman. My quick review at the top of this one is, and I'll say it again later as well, if you've read the novel, you don't need to read this. But, except for maybe part 1 of the 5 parts of this story, read part 1. Sure. But if and when those prequel stories come out that you have to be part of the Random House newsletter to read, that are going to tell you about what happened during Guilds of Ravnica and Ravnica Allegiance, then you probably don't even need to read part 1 of this story, because I assume that will cover it very similarly to the way that parts 2 through 5 covered the book. And if you're not planning on reading the book, then maybe you want to read this, but it's not as good as the book. It might just be worth it to you to buy the book. And if you genuinely, honestly cannot afford the $30 for the book, then maybe borrow it from somebody, because still that would be better than reading this free fiction. But anyway, I may have stolen all of your thunder on that one. What is your quick review, Amy?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
This story was terrible. Like, real bad.
Okay, so with that being said, I will do what I always do, which is tell you that to go read this story, if you would like to, after that review, because hey, this is our opinions, and even if a movie critic says a movie is bad, if I wanted to see the movie, I'd go watch the movie anyway. So, hey, if you want to go read the story and you don't exactly know where to find it, check the description box below. It will have a link to the article, and you can go there and read the story for yourself, to see for yourself, and then feel free to come back here and join in with us and tell us if you think we're right, if you think we're wrong, were we too harsh, were we too lenient, or did you just straight on agree with us? Any and all of those things, I'll do it at the top because we've been away for a while. That's a really good way to help show off your...
Hashtag for those pride.
We'll probably say it again at the end. But that's that. Because we try not to spoil too much. I'm not going to go through... we've been trying to do like a little bit of a recap. I'm not going to do that for this one, only because it's not really worth my time to then hear it for a third time.
The story is a recap.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And in fact, here, I wasn't planning on doing this. You know what? Here, it's right here. Look. I don't know if you can quite see it, but it's the book. It's the Ravnica War of the Spark book by Greg Weisman. It's by the same author. Just by this.
And you can tell because the words are exactly the same.
Literally, like if Greg hadn't written this, like if it was just somebody... I said to Amy, a 5-year-old with a thesaurus could have done a better job of transposing it, because that's all that you had to do. You could have just copied and pasted it, and then just every 5th word changed it in a thesaurus to a different word, and it would have been more varied from the book than this story was. Genuinely. So let's get into the full review itself, if that wasn't already us doing it. Let's talk about some of the different things. These stories, because there are going to be a few of these, which God help us, because we sure are gonna review every one of them. And thank you if and when you join us for all those, because I feel like it's going to just get progressively worse. But I hope that is not the case, although I suspect that it will be. But these stories follow Rat, whom, to be fair, and we are going to review the book. Don't get me wrong. We're going to do a JaAR on the book.
Yes.
To be honest, we haven't finished it yet.
Right.
But for the amount of the book that we have read, I can say on the book, now it's worth it. Go buy it. It's definitely worth it. There are people out there who have said, it's a little heavy in terms of exposition. Yeah, but we'll talk about why when we review the book. That's really neither here nor there, but my point is go read the book. Go buy the book and or read the book instead of reading these stories. Yeah. It's just going to be more worth your time. But these stories follow Rat, who, notably in the book, I thought was a very interesting and fun new character.
I agree.
And because we're following Rat, at least for the time being, we are also following Teo, who also seems to be somewhat of an interesting new character. I would argue Teo is not as interesting as Rat to me, at least from what I've read so far. Although he is still very interesting, I just think Rat's a little bit better. Maybe I just gravitate towards that kind of a character. I don't know if you agree or disagree on that.
I don't know. I also like Teo. I don't know. I thought, like, when I saw Teo's card, I was like, oh, he's so cool. Like, I love him, you know? And then, I don't know. He's like, okay.
Okay. I think...
But Rat is definitely fun.
Yeah. No, Rat's a lot of fun. And so I was excited about these stories because I was looking forward to seeing more of Rat's fun personality.
Right.
And instead we just saw the exact same parts of Rat's personality. And in fact, arguably worse parts of Rat's personality.
Right, yeah.
Because, so, part 2 of this story was the worst. Because most of it was dialogue on Rat's part, which is word for word, copied and pasted, no question, the dialogue from the book.
Yes, correct.
And you would think, if a story is being told from a different perspective, right, you're in a different person's head when the exact same portion of a story is being told. It's been done in movies, it's been done in television shows, it's been done in comic books / books, right? I'm a Marvel Comics fan. I think of the Civil War book. There was a novel that was written on the Civil War comic books back from original Civil War back in like 2006. And I read that book and it was fascinating because you don't get, a lot of times in comics, like there are thought bubbles, but you don't get the in-depth feelings and emotions and thought processes that you get in a novel that's told from a first-person perspective, because that person can say, oh, wow, you know, that's making me really sad, or I'm very contemplative and that's why I'm not paying attention when I, you know, don't see that big, scary superhuman charging at me from the right. You know, something like that. Like, that is a very good example of what was I guess what they were trying to do here, or I guess the ideal of what could have been done here, and what completely missed the mark. Because if I'm hearing a story from Rat's perspective when I had previously heard it from Teo's perspective, and later on when I've previously heard it from Gideon's or Ral's or Kaya's perspective, there should be different things.
Right.
Because Rat is going to pick up on different things, and she's going to think things differently than other people did.
Yep.
And that wasn't what happened.
No.
And so, like I said, part 2 specifically for me was the worst, because it was just Rat's dialogue with Teo, just basically copied and pasted, except we didn't get all of Teo's confusing opinions about the world around him.
Right.
Rat didn't talk about the world around her because she lives there.
Right.
So she doesn't need to talk about...
It's not weird.
She doesn't need to talk about what the Transguild Promenade looks like, and she's not going to call it like the weird arches and the big bridge. And there's a moment, I think I wrote this down. There's a moment where Teo looks around, because he's talking about Gobekhan, and he talks about Oasis. And he's like, you know, and he says, oh, on Oasis, you know, we have that. And then he looks at Rat and he's like, oh, Oasis is a big city on Gobekhan. And then he looks around and he goes, well, I guess it's not that big of a city. And I think I just now did more to explain why that was the way it was than this version of the story did. Because in the book, Teo looks around, and you know from Teo's perspective that he's looking around at the size of Ravnica around him.
Right.
And
he's a very impressive, imposing city for a guy like him who's not used to being there.
Right. Who, to him, Oasis was a big city, and now he is on Ravnica. But you don't get that perspective from Rat. From Rat, it's just, you know, he says, oh, it's a big city on Gobekhan, looks around and goes, well, not that big of a city.
Right.
you just remove all of the impact of that moment, which, sure, was it the biggest moment in the world? No. But does it show what, like Amy was just saying, what a big moment it was to Teo as a character to learn in that moment that, hey, this world is huge.
Right.
This
it's
city
very
is
different
huge.
from what I'm used to.
Right. It's the only thing that I can make it akin to, and I guess I'm in a comparison mood because I keep trying to compare things, but all of those movies where someone like a country boy or a girl from the country goes to the big city, right? I'm going to think New York City because I'm from New York. That's just what happens. But there's that scene in a lot of movies or TV shows where the person is standing in the middle of Times Square and staring straight up, and they're spinning in a circle looking around, and the camera is circling them as well. And there's just that moment of them like realizing how big buildings can be and how big the world is and how many people are all around them.
Right.
That's the moment that Teo was having here, and it's just completely washed over in this story. And it's like, oh, okay, well, look, maybe they washed over it so that they could get to something more interesting, and they assume that we've read the book, and so they're going to wash over that because we're going to get to the next thing that's more interesting and more impressive. Nope. Then we get to the raven-haired woman and her black dress.
Okay, first of all, Liliana's hair is brown, not black. And her dress, certainly not black.
I know that in the game of Magic the Gathering, to try to show black magic as actually black is like tougher. Like a lot of times you have to show it as like smokier or grayer, because if it's black it just looks like tar, right? So that's not as cool. So you show it as more violet looking. But that doesn't automatically mean that something that's violet is black. Her dress is violet, purple, whatever,
Yes,
like
her dress,
some variation
her
of
dress is
that.
not made of necrotic magic. Her dress is made of fabric. So
Very
if
elegant
her
fabric, according to Rat.
fabric dress is purple, it's not just then all of a sudden black is purple.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Also, let's talk about for the first time, and I want to talk, well, we'll see as Amy and I get further into this story, but Greg Weisman, from my assessments of these stories, because again, the novel, quite good so far from what we've read. Very much enjoy it, very much recommend it.
Yes.
And so from that perspective, I can tell you Greg is a good writer. From reading these stories, if I had read this story first, I probably wouldn't want to buy the novel.
Nope.
Which is why I'm telling you,
Absolutely not.
it's still worth it to you to buy the novel, because good God, these stories, this story, I can't speak for next week and the week after or whatever, but this story is not indicative of, in my opinion, the writing style of the book.
It's not a good ad.
No. Although to be fair, that's just not their style. Watch our other video on that. They don't have good ads for the book.
No.
So anyway, that's
Or
again,
any
seriously,
at all.
yes, that's a separate video, and I genuinely
Yes.
encourage you to go watch it if you haven't already. Although a good number of you did, so thank you.
What I encourage you to do is buy the novel. Do not read these stories.
Nope. Just come here and watch us rant about it if that's something that you enjoy.
If
it's
you
not,
even want to.
yeah. If it's not, then turn this off right now because
Yeah,
But
just read the book.
right. But I will say, there were. I said read part 1. So let's talk about part 1 of this story for a little bit, just to have a little bit of a breath of fresh air before we continue on with the BS that was the rest. Part 1, we meet up with Rat, and she is talking about Hikara, and basically introducing us to Hikara. Because the book kind of talks about her, but we're going to hear more about Hikara later in the stories that are telling the stories prior to what's going on right now. That is a very confusing thing, and I'm like, I join my fellow Vorthos in being flabbergasted, but also furious at the fact that you have these awesome moments and opportunities, that's the word I was looking for, to create these great stories, and you you chop it up into 3 different pieces, completely mix those pieces up, and then just throw them at us. Barely advertise them. I saw a lot of people online.
And the pieces aren't even different from one another.
No. Well, these 2 aren't. The first one hopefully will be, although after reading the book and these stories, it seems like we're going to find out about all that stuff anyway beforehand. But I'm hoping that we get to meet Hikara a little bit better in those prequel stories. But
who knows?
But I was gonna say really quickly. I saw people online today commenting that they didn't even know that these stories were going to be released. They were like, "What is this?" I mean, I knew they were going to be released. I did. We talked about that. We knew going in. Thank God, because some of those people were Vorthos content creators and they were not aware that these stories were coming out. Thank God we knew.
Not okay.
No, but thank God we knew, because otherwise we might have gone out and spent some time with our friends at Insane Games who tend to stream on Wednesday nights, and this is when we film our show. Our friend DAM314 on Twitch, whom we get to spend time with occasionally on his stream, we might have just been there,
right,
or have been planning to go there, and then halfway through the day had this dropped on us and been a little pissed off about it.
Right.
But this time I will say it was announced. We knew it was coming, but I think that's because there were certain people who were chomping at the bit for Vorthos information, and others who just kind of were aware and kind of resigned themselves to the fact that there wasn't going to be anything besides the book. So that may be the reasoning there. I'm just going to throw that out there and then move on, because I saw it, other people didn't. That's life. But it does show. It goes to show the lack of care and
consistency
in the announcements, or where to look for them, or how big of a deal they are or are not. So that's that.
I don't know. It just seems so. I don't know. It seems like the people who are in charge of doing these things are just so scattered.
Yeah.
They're just like their heads are just all over the place, and that's coming from me. That's saying something.
So I it's funny. We just talked about that just now, and I said that we were going to be talking about something nice and a breath of fresh air. We haven't gotten there yet. Sorry. So we met Rat, and Rat is talking about Hikara, whom is Rat is kind of hero worshipping Hikara, to the point where she's kind of wearing bells, but not really in her hair, the way that Hikara wears them in her hair. She's wearing them like on her shoulders, because, she doesn't want to make it obvious that she's copying her, but she's copying her, which is very Rat. I mean, from what we've seen of Rat, that sounds like Rat. Where Rat's like, I'm totally not copying you. Look, they're on my shoulders, not my hair. Sure, Rat. Sure. And we kind of see their relationship, and Hikara's like, you're my Rat. And Rat's like, I'm your Rat. Rat is doing tasks for Hikara. She's spying on Ral Zarek. And so we get to hear a little bit, again, if we had read the prequel stories prior to this might not be interesting to me, at least.
Right.
But for me, this was interesting, and this is why I say, if you're watching this after having read the prequel stories, then you probably don't need to read part 1. But there was discussion of Ral and Niv Mizzet meeting in a lab, and then there's an explosion in the lab, and so they were trying to do something and it didn't work, and then the only thing that Rat hears, because there are a lot of fans going on, is them saying, oh, well, the beacon's now our only hope. So what we can probably piece together from that is that the machine that they were trying to use was the one that they were going to try to use, they being, again, Ral and Niv Mizzet, were going to try to use to make Niv strong enough to take on Nicol Bolas, which I guess eventually leads to Niv Mizzet Reborn. Again, we have not finished the book yet, so
right.
we will get there. But that machine didn't work. We then know it leads to Niv taking on Nicol Bolas without being ready for it and dying in the process. And the beacon that they're talking about is the Planeswalker beacon that brings all the Planeswalkers, including Teo. And so, and then we kind of go from there. So that was, at least for us, a new piece of information, because it talks about the prequel stories that haven't come out yet. Very Star Wars of them to do it that way. And I'm sure that they would be very happy to jump on the fact that, yes, it's totally like Star Wars, and not because we screwed up in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Then I want to talk about something odd. I don't think it's bad necessarily, but it's weird. In this story, a couple of times, Rat breaks the fourth wall. which, again, not necessarily a bad thing, not necessarily a good thing, it's a thing.
Right.
And I was saying to Amy, I don't know, I think this may be the first time it has ever happened in a magic story.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but we've been doing this since, well, we've been filming it since Shadows over Innistrad, but we've been reading since around Magic Origins, and I can't remember, which doesn't mean it didn't happen, but I cannot remember a fourth wall break from then until now, at least with the online stories. And that's a lot. That seems like a lot to me.
Right.
So, as with anything we say, if you know that we are incorrect, please let us know.
Yeah.
You know, if you could include the story or the example, like, you know, in text, that'd be great. But I genuinely think this is the first time it's ever happened.
We were reading it, and he mentioned that to me, that there was a fourth wall break, and that he wasn't sure that that had ever happened before. And I said, really? Because it seemed so natural for her to do it when I was listening to the story. But I think now looking back that it's probably because the story, we had already heard it.
Okay.
The,
Okay.
so the story...
So it needed to give us something else besides what it had already given us? Is that what you're saying?
Not even that.
Okay.
The audience was already aware of the story, so why not the fourth wall break?
Yeah.
Because the audience is super aware.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. And
like...
yeah, and it was in at least two places where, like, the first one was Rat kind of...
It was almost like it was making fun of the fact that its own self was being repetitive and ridiculous.
Okay.
But it was making fun of itself prior to being that.
And it's funny because I would not have looked at it that way, only because my opinion of the intelligence of this story, having nothing to do with Greg Weisman's intelligence or ability, because, like I said, the book is good, or the novel is good. My assessment of the intelligence of this story is that they would not have been able to be that self-aware. Just because of the mindset that I was in reading this and how mad I was at reading literally the same words over and over again and not just dialogue. Right. Because yes, dialogue...
Didn't even vary.
No. Because dialogue would make sense. Because that's the words that were said. And so we're hearing those moments. I'm talking about...
You don't want to change the dialogue. Because then you're starting to confuse the readers to a point of being like, okay, now which character do we believe?
Correct.
Because now we're getting a different story from every angle. And even though that might happen in real life, I think the reader needs to feel like they're being told the truth. Mm-hmm. And I feel like they might start to feel like they're not being told the truth if it was too varied from perspective to perspective.
Right.
But I mean, the words that were not dialogue were still exactly the same. And just like he said before, that doesn't make sense. When it's Kaya's perspective and when it's Rat's perspective and when it's, whoever else.
Ralzeric, Gideon.
Yeah, like the words that are used in the in-betweens are not going to be the same.
No.
They're just not.
I have examples, right?
Unless he's trying to act like he is narrating the story and the only perspective that exists is only in the dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
because he didn't even write it that way. I don't know. I just don't know.
The one that stood out to me the most in this story, because there were two big ones for me before I just kind of glazed over and stopped paying attention. One of them was not as big of a deal, where it was like Kaya going through one of the Eternals and like going through him and coming out the other side, and Rat is watching this happen and then says, "She turned." he turned. Well, from Kaya's perspective, when she was telling it, she was like, I go right through him. I turned. He turned. And it was like, okay, sure. You know, and that was one. But that was after this other one where shortly after the portal opens and the Eternals start pouring through the portal and Liliana commands them to attack people, the first one that they are seen attacking, I believe it was from Gideon's perspective in the book. Obviously, here it was from Rat's. There is a woman. There is a woman who is trying to save a man from under a pile of rubble. That is all the information that you need to know. You should have a picture in your head of a woman leaning down to help a man out from under a pile of rubble, and an Eternal is coming up behind her and is going to kill her, and she doesn't know it.
Right.
And at least I believe it was from Gideon's perspective. When it was Gideon's perspective, Gideon still believed that Liliana was good. And so maybe Gideon thought that she was commanding the Dread Horde at that point to go and help this woman save that man. Maybe that's what he was thinking in that moment. And that, as a reader, is what you could be thinking in that moment for Gideon, right? That, okay, she's not evil yet. She hasn't done anything evil. It's not looking great, but she hasn't done anything evil. And then the Eternal kills the woman, and you're like, oh my God. But in the book and in this story, the words that were used were, a woman was saving her husband or boyfriend or brother. Literally, that is what was specified by both Gideon Jorah, aka Kythie and Iora, from Theros, and Rat from Ravnica. No. Sorry. Nope. They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't both have that exact same thought when describing that scene. Greg Weisman had that thought describing that scene. And it was copied and pasted between the two.
Right.
Because you could have just said a man. And honestly, if it had been copied and pasted from the book and it had just said a woman, like even if you describe her, right, a redheaded woman helping a man out of a pile of rubble. If it said those exact words in both Gideon's perspective and Rat's perspective, fine. I'm fine with that because that's super vague. It's a woman and a man. The woman is helping the man. It's a pile of rubble. Okay, that's fine enough. But to have both of those people, different ages, different backgrounds, different genders, different ethnicities possibly, just both of them are like, it's her husband or boyfriend or brother.
No one says that. No one talks like that. Let alone two people who are from two completely different worlds.
It was
no one talks like that.
It was real dumb. And in the book, I thought it was odd, but I moved on because I'm enjoying the book, and so I wanted to keep going with the story, and I didn't want to stop and be like, that was a weird choice of words. And then think about it for a while. It was like, okay, whatever. Not a huge deal. The book is still good. Let's keep going.
Right. It was one thing when you were reading the book to be able to be like, okay, well, it's just being descriptive, like overly descriptive.
Because it has 400 pages to work with.
Right. This story does not. So it doesn't need all of that extra garbage.
Husband or boyfriend or brother.
It's like, what is happening?
Yeah. And that I think in my mind was where I shut it off. Because like, I will also say part 2, which I talked about earlier being the part that frustrated me the most, the husband or boyfriend or brother part was not from part 2. But part 2 was Teo meeting Rat for the first time and vice versa. I loved that part in the book. Because, like I said, I enjoy Rat as a character. You get to meet Rat. You get to that moment where Rat is like rambling off information to Teo, and she pauses for a moment, and Teo's like, and then she cuts right back in and cuts him off and keeps talking. That I knew so much about Rat just from that small interaction that I loved her and I wanted to hear more about her. And then these stories come that I was super excited about, and I got a copy and paste job. If I did that at my job, I'd be fired. I'm not even kidding. Like, sure, it's a bit of a joke, but it's also not. Like, if Greg Weisman's contract for that book, for the novel, was just write a novel, and also some prequel stories, fine. because then it was included. If it was separate, if he was paid separately for these stories, whoo boy, Greg made out like a damn bandit on these.
He still did. Because you know what?
He just...
Okay. You know what? You don't deserve to get paid for a novel when people can just read the story online and it's the same damn story.
And
I'm sorry.
It is and it isn't, right? Like, it's a very crappy boiled down version.
Right.
But...
It's definitely not the version I would recommend reading.
The book is so much... I can't...
But if you're the type of person who doesn't have time to read a novel, and all you want are the facts of what happens in the story, this is the perfect way to go. You read it online, it's free, it's the same damn story, you don't have to pay for it, and you know what? I'm sorry, he just shouldn't get paid for a novel that's gonna be the same words, same exact words as a free story. It just doesn't make sense.
I looked at it as vice versa. I just don't. I think these are not worth anything because the book exists, unless I was genuinely trying to think while reading this story today, who is this for?
Right.
I've asked that in the past about things.
Right. What is your target audience for this thing?
Because, to be completely honest, right, there were a couple of things that went through my head. It was like, oh, well, there are hardcore Vorthos like us who spend the time to look every week, right? And it's been a long time. So for those people that didn't even know it was coming at all, there may still be people that don't know who are pretty avid, right? And if you didn't know until you found this video, please let us know. Because that would prove a lot.
Yeah, we would like to know that information.
Yes. But
just like you all would like to know if the stories are coming out.
Right. But more importantly, I feel like the people who come back here week after week, not here on JaAR, here on magicstory.com to read these stories week after week after week, and who have been reading the Guilds of Ravnica and Ravnica Allegiance stories by Nikki Drayden, which were talking about, like, way on the fringe characters that have nothing at all. Like, if you hadn't read any of those stories, you'd be perfectly fine and up to date with these if you had stopped at Ixalan and Dominaria.
Yep.
Perfectly fine. Right? Or what was that? Like Corset 2020 or 2019.
Whatever it is.
Whatever was prior to Guilds of Ravnica, if you hadn't read Guilds or Ravnica Allegiance, you could have bought that book and you would have missed nothing except the prequel stories that haven't come out yet because they didn't bother. But those stories, though, were damn good. The Guilds and the Ravnica Allegiance stories. We liked them.
Those
we
were
talked about that. We liked them.
That you were made to care about, regardless of the fact that those characters are not essential to this story arc.
And if we never see those characters again, it wouldn't be the end of the world.
Right. And you get the feeling that these are tertiary characters that you'll never get to see again, but you hate that by the end because you love them by the end.
Right.
That was not done with this.
No, and so, but that's why I bring it up in the first place, is because those stories were there and they existed, and these just, I don't know, it's what made me think of who is it for.
Right.
Because the people that read the Guilds of Ravnica and Ravnica Allegiance stories, they would have probably bought the book.
Yeah.
Just like us, I assume. And so, because I'm thinking that way, if you are someone who was not interested in buying the book, look, if finances aren't there, I would be a little surprised because it's only $30, but at the same time, I'm not in your situation, and so I'm not going to judge you, right? If you cannot muster the $30, if you can't put it together, I don't blame you, and I understand, and I hope.
Or maybe you just would prefer to spend the money on the cards.
Because the set is so cool.
Yeah.
That's 2 drafts at a an LGS that prices draft at $15.
And there are so many planeswalkers in this set. It's
awesome.
It's mind-blowing.
It's so cool. But finances aside, if you genuinely cannot afford the book, I hope that you will get an opportunity to borrow it from someone who was able to afford it. because I think it's worth it. And if you want to read it, I hope that you get to read it. Because it's worth it. I think every moment that we've spent on it so far, I think has been worth our time. And I do not envision that changing anytime soon. These, on the other hand, we're going to read them.
Yeah. For better or worse, we're going to read them.
Yeah. And I struggle very hard because I want to keep an open mind. Because who knows?
And it sucks because we can't give a review that is based entirely on not having read any of the book. So people who just get to read these free stories might see them a little bit differently. They might say,
Possibly.
actually, I like these stories and I think they're cool, whatever. And we don't have that perspective because we have the perspective of it being exactly the same as the book that we paid for.
Exactly the same, yet a lot worse.
Yes.
In exactly the same.
Exactly the same, yet somehow terrible.
Yeah, surprisingly so. Although I guess that's what you get. A $30 value versus a $0 value.
Right, exactly. So
that's
you definitely got what you paid for.
This is the bargain
scenarios.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the bargain bin version of the novel.
Right.
It is.
But all that means is that somebody who doesn't have the novel to go by is reading these stories and falling in love with the characters. You know, caring about Rat, going, oh, that person's really funny, that person's really cool, that person's a lot like me.
Oh, yeah.
You know, whatever it is. And in those same ways that we did, it's just that once we hear it the second time, now it's ridiculous, old, tired, boring, and a waste of time.
Go watch our Ixalan Rivals of Ixalan reviews. Because we loved a lot of that stuff the first time through. And then when they repeated it the second, third, fourth, and fifth times, we were not as happy about them. Because they took something that was very good and very meaningful, and they just beat the crap out of it.
Right.
They beat us. They beat the crap out of us with it.
Right.
By saying it over and over and over again.
Yeah. They were like, we know you liked this. You liked this, right?
I sure did. I really did.
You liked it, right?
Not really anymore. No.
But you
No.
said you liked it.
No, you gotta stop.
But you did, though.
No, I did.
At one point, you liked it.
Yeah.
I know you did.
It's hard to remember now.
You liked it.
Not anymore.
I promise. Oh my God.
Even that was getting a little tiresome. But yes, it was very, very frustrating. So with that being said, there are a lot of.
But I will say, at least when they did it in Ixalan and
Rivals
of Ixalan, they at least changed the wording a little bit from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
So that we were like, oh, we're hearing this BS again. But at least, you know, if it was just that somebody didn't read the prior story and now they were coming back in to reading the stories and they were like, hey, I wonder what happened last time. Or they didn't even realize that they had missed one. They were caught up. This is just...
Yeah.
It's just word for word.
Yeah. Well, because it's the same moment. It's just, I was saying to Amy, it's that we were seeing the same moments in this story that we had seen in the book, just from like 30 feet to the left.
Yeah. And it wasn't even like a cool, okay, here's a change in perspective where like, you know, because they had that too. What stories did that?
Oh God, you're putting me on the spot big time. Oh, you kind of might be talking about Ixalan Rivals of Ixalan again, because you had that moment of Kumena falling out of the top of the tower in Araska.
Right, yes.
Right,
Okay.
and so you saw Vona knock him out, but you see that also from Watley and Angrath's perspective. You see it from Jason Veraska's perspective.
Right. If you want a few examples of how that sort of concept was done correctly, read those stories.
Oh, yeah.
Go back and revisit those stories and revisit our review videos of those.
That's all Rivals, by the way.
And go, wow, okay, yeah, because then you're actually seeing it from those actual perspectives.
Yeah.
Pieces that this character did not see, was not there for, aren't there. And you know they happened because you read them already from the other person's perspective, you know? But in this, it's just everything is there.
Yeah.
So you can't even say it's from a different perspective because it's just the same exact words.
Yeah. So
It's
for example, from part 4 of this story, Rat is looking out and she's talking about like, oh, Raul Zarek is using lightning to kill the Eternals, and then there's this guy is running up and he yells the name Chandra out, and it's like humans, 4 humans that I've never seen, or 3 humans that I've never seen before, or I guess 2, right? She said there were 2 that she'd never seen before. One woman who she recognized as Miss Lavinia from the Azorius, who is in charge of the, what's his name? What's Jace's title? Why am I blanking
Guild
on this?
Pact?
Thank you. The Living Guild Pact. That, you know, and she helps out Mr. Jace Beller in the Living Guild Pact, who is also right next to her. And then there's these other 2 guys. And it's like, sure, if you read the novel, you know those other 2 guys are Gideon and Teferi. Because that was that adventuring party at that moment in the story. And so, again, in that moment, I was like, huh, I remember that part in the story. That's Gideon and Teferi. I'm really glad that I knew that. And then...
But that was like the only time that happened.
No. But then a paragraph or 2 later, she goes, by the way, I found out those other guys were Mr. Gideon Jura and Mr. Teferi. And I guess they don't have last names. And it's like, you didn't have to... Sure. You could have described them as characters as opposed to just flat out hand-holding us with the names so that like we could maybe figure out who it was. But
they're trying to make it so that if you can't get the novel, that you still get the whole story with the online stories.
Right. And again...
And that's great
yes.
for people who can't afford the novel.
Correct.
But it's really not. Because then people are spending money on a novel that they don't need because they're getting the whole story for free.
Yep.
I just don't get that.
So at this point, we're talking around the same points over and over. Yeah. So I will put you all out of your misery,
right.
And we can put us out of our misery, so we can go to bed.
We don't want to be as repetitive as these stories are.
So, thank you. The only other thing I'll say is, after all these stories, we will probably make another overarching video, just talking about if these stories continue on this track. We will have a video at the end that we will feel like we have to make to talk about some things. We will also be reviewing the novel, and please look forward to that, because genuinely it's awesome. I encourage you to go get it. I'm not sponsored to say any of that because, God.
Lord knows they don't do that.
But I recommend it highly. I really enjoyed it, and we will talk more about that in that video itself, but it's going to be a while away, so if you haven't gotten the book yet and you really want to hear our review of it, we would love for you to discuss it with us, so please, if you have the chance and you haven't yet, I recommend going to pick it up.
Yes. Try to go get the book, try to read it, try to revisit these videos at some point. If it takes you a while to read, that's fine. Just, and then whatever comments you have on either the online stories or the novels, whatever you would like to say, please, we'd love to hear it in the comments. Just please don't leave spoilers in the comments for people if they haven't. I mean, that's not really fair.
No, but from anything from the story itself that we're reviewing is perfectly fair game. And I mean, to be fair, like anything that was, I guess, spoiled in the cards themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that, we've talked about that too on the channel in a couple of videos. So those will probably pop up at the end over our heads somewhere. But and we encourage you to go watch those. Hopefully, let us know what you thought of the new set. I think we're still working on it. I think there's a little bit more that we could do still, but we have to try to figure it out for ourselves. What more we might want to add. But I love this, so enjoy
I
that.
thought you meant the card set.
No,
I was like waiting for you to say something about pre-release.
The JaAR set. I apologize. What do you think of our set, guys?
Right.
I like it. I think it's cool. So if you dislike it, let us know. But whatever.
This is a puzzle that Joe did. If you can't really tell that it's a puzzle.
I did. We glued
you
it up.
Probably can't.
I did it pretty quickly too, to be fair. Considering
the puzzle or the gluing? The gluing process was not.
No, the gluing was not the
fast.
Greatest. No, but the puzzle was
great.
cool. The puzzle took me a lot less time than I expected it to, given that there are the pictures on here repeat.
Yes. And not only that, but the picture on the box.
The picture on the box
is not the whole picture
Good God.
of the puzzle.
No, nor is it to scale. It was so bad.
Oh my God.
Joe and Amy review puzzles. Anyway, so yeah, that's a different story. We can talk about that at some other time.
Anyway.
So thank you guys so much for watching this episode of JaAR. I really, really hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you can give us your feedback, like Amy said, leaving your information, your thoughts, your feelings, your comments, your concerns, your questions in the comments down below. It is a very good way to show off your...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
I told you we'd do it twice. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter. I very rarely say that. But you can check us out on Facebook and Twitter. The links to that are down in the description box below.
Especially Facebook, I feel like.
I hope that people that are following us on Facebook don't feel like we neglect you on Facebook. We love you. We just don't, like, we'll release the videos and stuff on there. I'm more often on Twitter, so it's like a lot easier to join in on the conversation. Plus, there's not a lot of conversation on Facebook from non-Wizards of the Coast Magic the Gathering pages. So, you can feel free to chat with us wherever you can find us.
Yes.
Facebook, Twitter, etc. I'd like to think that I'm somewhat responsive on either, really. But regardless, check us out on all of those places. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of JaAR from the Geek for All YouTube channel. I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, guys, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.